Welcome back, dear viewers. And in this segment of our program, we are going to talk about the climate change and its impact on development, and on the economy. We'll also try to know more about the government efforts to reduce the negative impact of climate change on environment. And to shed more light on this issue, we are joined by Dr. Mamdouh Antar, Head of the Regional Training Sector for Water Resources and Irrigation at the Ministry of Irrigation. Good afternoon. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Sir, actually the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation is implementing actually a water security strategy to deal with the solid waste and garbage, rationalizing the water usage and developing crops that can withstand the drought and the high temperatures. Can you tell us more about the strategy of the ministry?
Okay. Thank you for the invitation. First, before we start, as your colleague started talking about the climate change,
Yes,
so I would prefer just to shed some light on what do we mean by the climate change, what is the climate change is going to do. Over the past historical years, we can identify what we call a rainfall pattern. So rainfall pattern means how frequent and where and when the spatial temper and spatial location of the rainfall. So for a country, it has to be rainy in this season, in these places. This is in terms of the rainfall. Also for the temperature also is associated with spatial and temporal distribution. So the climate change is going to change all this pattern we used to have before. Over the historical years, the people, the nation, the countries developed its plans based on what had happened before in terms of rainfall, in terms of temperature. Now the climate change is going to change all of this. The location, the places we used to have a rainfall, it might face a drought phenomena, it might face also flood phenomena. There will be an increase in the temperature. So this will affect the agriculture production. So all these risks, when we talk about the climate change, we are talking about something totally different. The question now, is Egypt away from these impacts, from these consequences of the climate change? Is Egypt safe? We have to look at the water resources of Egypt.
Yes.
We have to look at the agriculture sector in Egypt. If we define the water situation in Egypt, so we identify Egypt as a semi-arid country.
Okay.
Most of the fresh water resources coming from outside the borders, from the Nile Basin. We have a limited rainfall along the coast, and we have groundwater. So we really facing a scarcity in the water resources. The population growth increases the situation complicated. So for this, to face such challenges in water, the Ministry of Water Resources, not today, not last year, but since the early of 90s, developed what we call a National Water Resources Plan. The National Water Resources Plan has a main objective, which is to safeguard the water resources for the entire country till a certain time. We identified it in the plan by 2037. So the National Water Resources Plan, looking at the limited resources and the increasing demand. The limited resources and the increasing demand has a gap of 20 million cubic meter. We have to fill this gap. We are filling this gap by the reusing of water, by also the rationalization of using the groundwater, either the shallow groundwater and the deep groundwater. The National Water Resources Plan has 4 pillars. The first pillar is to increase the water resources. Increasing the water resources means looking at the Upper Nile Basin, looking at the non-conventional water resources like the groundwater, shallow and deep, looking at the desalination, increasing the rate of the desalination, also looking at the reuse, the water quality itself. I have to pay an attention to the quality in order to be able to reuse it again. So this is the first pillar. The second pillar, looking at the water use efficiency to optimize the utilization of the limited water resources by applying modern irrigation system, which will save a lot of water and will increase the productivity of the agricultural land. The third pillar is to look at the water quality. All the issue we are facing now is the deterioration in some places in the water quality because people, they don't evaluate properly the value of the water. As we are in Egypt and we are facing a lot of challenges, we should pay an attention to keeping the water clean and don't throw the garbage in the river. The fourth pillar of the National Water Resources Plan is to the enabling environment, to make the legislation, the laws effective and applicable, and this will create a sort of a system which might support the country to face the challenges either from the water scarcity, or the challenges will be faced by the climate change, challenges will be faced because of the population growth, the increase in the social and economic activities. By the way, the National Water Resources Plan has been developed not only by the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation, but more than 9 ministries, other ministries and governmental entities were contributing in developing the plan.
So it's not only the Ministry of Irrigation that is working on this national plan, but it's in cooperation with other ministries in the country.
Yes. We had a regular meeting with the other ministries because in the plan
it's coordination.
It's a coordination, and it is defined by roles and responsibilities. So each ministry has a role, a certain role, and a certain responsibility. It has to achieve it by 2037.
But still we need to raise the public awareness about the importance of rationalizing the use of water. So how can we do this?
We are actually, the ministry is paying a lot of attention to this issue because we understand that the law itself and the plan itself is not enough to secure the water. So increasing the public campaign and the awareness of the value of the water, the fact that we used to live in or to manage a lot of water is already gone. Now we are facing a drought, so we are managing the scarcity, we are managing the drought itself. Also, we applied certain or several experiments that we invited some farmers and we introduced the modern irrigation system like the drip irrigation, the sprinkler irrigation, and we encouraged them and we supported them to apply this modern new system, this irrigation system in their land, and they applied it, and the results were very promising. So they saved water and they came out with more yield and more production, and they started to be a representative of the ministry in the governorates, in the villages, and to invite other colleagues, their colleagues, to apply this kind of modern irrigation system.
Yes. Sir, how can the good governance of usage of water contribute actually in reducing the threats of the climate change?
The threats of the climate change
which are increasing every single day, and we can feel it on the ground.
Yes. But at the end of the day, the climate change will make you facing a drought periods.
Yes.
And the drought periods, it will happen whether we have a climate change or we don't have a climate change, because the limited water, the limited resource of water is very few, and the population is increasing, so we have a gap. So we have to face the drought as a result of the population or as a result of climate change. This is number one. Number two, the climate change also, as we noticed over the past 2 or 3 years, unexpected rain, flash floods, in unexpected governorates, in unexpected time. So this is a source of water. The ministry is now started to launch a lot of projects to create lakes or tanks to collect this flush water, to rainfall water, and to make it available for use by different communities.
Yes.
Also, as I mentioned, the focusing on encouraging the farmers to modernize their irrigation system is one of the main concerns of the ministry. The desalination, we are also...
yes, that was my next question, sir. To what extent we are depending on the water desalination, the sea water desalination, in order to help in the irrigation and to reduce the usage of the water, the other water?
Now it is something we, the decision makers, has agreed upon in the government and
Yes.
in the ministry itself, that all of the northern coast communities, they have to rely on the desalinated water. They will not rely too much on the fresh surface water because simply we don't have this luxury to extend the fresh surface water up to these northern communities. And I hope this will save a lot of water and also will support the ministry also to face the expected challenges due to the scarcity of the water.
Yeah.
So, sir, what is the regional and international role to help Egypt and African countries to face the adverse the adverse effects of climate change?
Okay, let us also reiterate the fact that Egypt and the African countries are in one continent, and African countries is a strategic dimension of Egypt. So strengthening the cooperation and the coordination with our colleagues, our brothers and sisters in the African countries is one of the main concerns of, I am not saying the ministry, but the government itself. So in our ministry, we have a lot of cooperation programs, either training programs, either also exporting the knowledge and the experience we have into our neighborhood countries in the Nile Basin. We encourage them also to optimize and to increase the water resources. So, for example, there are a huge amount of water is being lost due to the evaporation in the Sud region. We have also in the future plans also to talk or to recall these projects again, which will help the entire continent of Africa, including Egypt and the African countries and the Nile-based countries, to be ready to face the climate change adverse impacts.
Yes, another impact, of course, of the climate change is the threats to the beaches and to the shores.
Yes.
So what are the measures here taken by the ministry in order to protect the beaches of Egypt and the shores of Egypt from, of course, the increase in the sea level and the water level?
Okay. One of the consequences of the climate change is increasing the sea level rise. And if we look at Egypt, we have the Red Sea and we have the Mediterranean Sea. So one major risk here is increasing the sea level rise simply increase the intrusion of the saline water into the fresh water. Fresh water means the canals itself, means as well the groundwater. So the groundwater quality will be saline, it will not be usable anymore. This is one. The other thing is the loss of the land, the loss of the beaches due to the increase of the sea level rise, so there will be loss of the land. There will be some areas might be inundated due to the increasing of the sea level rise. We have a sector, an authority in the ministry responsible mainly in the shore protection. So they are developing all of the protection works to keep us protected from this impact of the intrusion of the sea level rise. The sea level rise also will have an impact on the social and the cohesion of the people in the country. Will be associated with a loss of land, a loss of jobs, a loss of farmers. And this will have an adverse impact on the economy itself. So protecting our shores, either along the Mediterranean Sea or along the Red Sea, is one of the main concerns of the ministry. And we started since years, not today or not last year, several projects to construct all the civil workers to protect our shores from the sea level rise.
So, sir, what is the role of the research centers in the face of these challenges?
It has a big role because what we are applying in the national water resources, simply we are calling for applying the new techniques, the new technology in water distribution, in forecasting of the flash floods, in water harvesting, in modeling the groundwater, deep and shallow groundwater. So we have a national water resource center in Egypt. It has 12 institutes in different aspects related to the water, and they are working as the technical arm of the ministry. All the technology and the new techniques we are applying, or we are calling or encouraging people to apply, has to be supported by the scientific support from the institutions and the research centers in the ministry. Also, they are working, they are supporting the ministry in several other aspects, either inside the country or outside the country. And also we have protocols and memorandum of understandings with different donors and the different financiers to support cooperative projects to be on board and up to the newest techniques and the newest technology.
Sir, of course, as we have said, that the issue of the Delta as well is of great concern to Egypt. Not only the Alexandria, but also the issue of the Delta. What are the other measures taken here by the ministry in order to face that threat to the shores of the Delta? Okay.
This is the balance between the saltwater intrusion and the freshwater.
Indeed.
So one of the things the country or the ministry has to do is to keep this balance there. Because you have the saltwater coming from the sea. In order to create that balance, you have to release a freshwater in order to keep the salt water away from the delta. So this is a risk because we don't have enough water available, fresh water to create this balance. This is one risk. The other risk also is the modern irrigation systems. The modern irrigation systems, you carry out the suitable amount of the required amount of water to the crop. So there is no groundwater losses, but actually it has a lot important to create such a balance. To keep the delta safe, we are releasing water to keep this balance between the salt and the fresh water. This is number one. The authority responsible for the shore protection creates dikes and all these barriers to stop the intrusion of the salt water to the delta.
So, sir, tell us more about the possibilities of reusing water.
It is not the possibilities in Egypt anymore. It is a must.
Yes.
Because, as I mentioned, we have a limited water. fresh water, and we have a gap of 20 million, and this gap might be increasing as well. So we're filling this gap by reusing the water. So reusing the water means that I am releasing the water and it is used by a certain farm, and the excess water will go to the drain. So I repump
Yes.
the water from the drain back to the canal to be reused again. The major element here, or the sensitive element here, is the quality of the water itself. If the quality is not up to the standard to be used in the irrigation, this is another challenge. So the reusing of the water, it is a major concern of the ministry, and also it is a major alternative to save the water and to make sure that we have enough resources. But the point here is the water quality. The water quality not only from the irrigation part, but from the factories, from the domestic sector, also from the people themselves, the culture of the people themselves to keep the water clean as much as possible. This will allow the ministry to reuse it again. For your information, every drop of water not be released to the sea unless it has to be used more than 4 or 5 times, recycled more and up to 4 times or 5 times. So you have to imagine the quality of
So
that.
this needs high technology, I
Yes,
think.
yes, exactly.
And do we have this technology?
We are working on that.
Yes.
We are working on that, and we are also getting the support, as mentioned, by the National Water Research Center.
Yes.
But in order to be able to reuse the water, you have to make sure that it have the accepted quality first.
Yes. Sir, that would bring me to ask about the role of the Green Climate Fund in providing the funding for the projects implemented by the ministry in order to protect the coasts of Egypt.
Yeah. We have one of these Green Climate Fund projects to protect the shores along the Mediterranean Sea. It is really funded by the GEF, if I'm correct, and it comes from the adaptation mechanism for the Green Climate Fund. Egypt is working on that. There is a lot of available funds in the pipeline. Let me say that, but the problem is it needs a lot of preparation and documentation and other data collection and things like that. But it is a major resource for the countries to get fund to face the climate change, to mitigate the impact, and to be able to create an adaptation environment to be able to deal or cope with the climate change consequences.
So, sir, we only have 2 minutes left, and before wrapping up this edition, can you give our audience some tips to rationalize the use of water?
I would like to emphasize that the water is very valuable.
Yes.
We don't have enough water. There are a lot of challenges we are facing. The most important message I would like to emphasize is not only the government, not only the Ministry of Water Resources has the responsibility to keep the Nile River or the water in the Nile River usable. It is also a role of the communities, of the farmers, of the people themselves to keep the Nile River
Yes.
clean as much as it is
Yes,
possible.
indeed, Dr. Mamdouh Antar, the head of the regional training sector for water resources and irrigation at the Ministry of Irrigation. Thank you very much for being our guest for today and for your first.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
And now, dear viewers, a short break, and we'll be back with our second segment for today, so stay tuned.